I still remember the day Jake approached me, his face a mix of embarrassment and hope. We'd been friends since our freshman year of college, both of us now in our early 20s, navigating that awkward space between student life and whatever comes after. I'm Alex, by the way. I've always been the more put-together one, at least on the surface. I had my license at 16, my own car by 19, and a reputation for being reliable. Jake, on the other hand, was brilliant but scattered, the kind of guy who could explain quantum physics but somehow forget where he parked his bike. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Jake texted me to meet him at our usual coffee shop. The spring air had that perfect crispness to it, flowers just starting to bloom around campus. I spotted him immediately when I walked in, hunched over a mug of something that probably had too much caffeine, his dark curls falling over his eyes in that way that always made my stomach do a little flip. Not that I'd ever admitted that to anyone, least of all myself. So, he said after I sat down, stirring his coffee with unnecessary focus, I failed my driving test today. I wasn't exactly surprised. Jake had been putting off getting his license for years, always finding some excuse. Public transportation was better for the environment. He enjoyed walking. His bike got him everywhere he needed to go. But we both knew the truth. He was terrified of driving. I'm sorry, I offered, genuinely sympathetic. What happened? Jake groaned, finally looking up at me. The stick shift happened. I thought I had it down, you know? But then the examiner had me parallel park on this slight hill, and I panicked. Stalled out 3 times. The look on that guy's face. He shook his head, the memory clearly painful. I could picture it perfectly. Jake, who hated being perceived as incompetent at anything, having to endure the judgment of a stranger while failing at something most people consider basic. For someone as proud as Jake, it must have been excruciating. Everyone fails something sometimes, I said, trying to comfort him. You'll get it next time. That's when he looked at me with those eyes, the ones that always seemed to see right through me. That's actually why I wanted to talk to you. I was wondering, would you maybe help me practice? With the stick shift, I mean. My heart did something strange in my chest. I had learned to drive on my dad's old manual Subaru and now drove a beat-up Honda Civic with a 5-speed transmission. It wasn't anything special, but I knew how to handle it. You want me to teach you? I asked, suddenly aware of how this would mean hours of us alone together, in the close confines of my car. If you don't mind, Jake said quickly. The driving school is so expensive for extra lessons, and they're always rushing through everything. I thought maybe if a friend showed me. He trailed off, looking uncertain. Let me explain why this request hit me differently than it might have seemed on the surface. Jake and I had always had this unspoken thing between us. Nothing had ever happened. We'd both dated other people on and off throughout college, but there was always this current, this awareness. The kind where you find yourself laughing a little too hard at their jokes, or noticing when they get a haircut, or feeling inexplicably irritated when they mention a date. Sure, I heard myself saying before I'd fully thought it through. We could start this weekend if you want. The smile that broke across Jake's face was worth any hesitation I might have felt. You're a lifesaver, Alex. Seriously. We made plans to meet Saturday morning, when traffic would be light. As I walked back to my apartment afterward, I wondered what I'd gotten myself into. Teaching someone to drive stick isn't like explaining how to use a coffee maker. It's intimate. It requires patience, clear communication, and a willingness to be present through frustration. Plus, there was the whole issue of my increasingly difficult-to-ignore feelings for Jake. Saturday arrived with perfect driving weather. Clear skies, mild temperature, dry roads. I picked Jake up outside his apartment building, where he was waiting with 2 coffee cups and a paper bag. Breakfast, he explained, sliding into the passenger seat and handing me a coffee, and a peace offering in advance for whatever damage I might do to your clutch. The gesture was so thoughtful it made me smile. My clutch has survived worse, trust me. We drove to an empty parking lot at the community college on the edge of town. Weekend classes wouldn't start for hours, giving us plenty of space to practice. I parked and turned to Jake, who was looking at the gear shift with apprehension. Okay, I said, slipping into teacher mode. Before we switch seats, let's talk theory for a minute. The most important thing to understand about driving stick is that it's all about feeling the connection between the car and the road. It's not just mechanical, it's almost like a conversation between you and the vehicle. Jake nodded, watching my hand on the gear shift intently. That's what I struggle with. The driving instructor kept talking about feeling the bite point, but I could never tell when it was happening. That's because they probably gave you about 2 minutes to figure it out, I said. It takes time. And honestly, everyone stalls out at first. It's part of the learning process. I spent the next 20 minutes explaining the basics, the relationship between the clutch and the gas, the purpose of each gear, how to know when to shift up or down. Jake listened with that intense focus he got when learning something new, asking smart questions that showed he understood the concepts. The problem wasn't knowledge, it was application. Ready to try? I asked finally. Jake took a deep breath. As I'll ever be. We switched seats, and I watched as Jake adjusted everything meticulously. Seat position, mirrors, even the angle of the steering wheel. His attention to detail was something I'd always admired about him. Okay, remember what I said. I guided. Clutch all the way in, shift to first, then slowly release the clutch while gently pressing the gas. What followed was both painful and endearing. Jake stalled immediately, the car jerking forward and then dying with a shudder. His cheeks flushed with embarrassment. That's normal, I assured him quickly. Try again. This time, give it a little more gas as you feel the clutch starting to engage. 3 more stalls followed before Jake finally got the car moving smoothly across the parking lot. The look of triumph on his face made something warm bloom in my chest. I did it, he exclaimed, circling the empty lot at a cautious 10 miles per hour. You're a natural, I said, meaning it. Now try stopping and starting again. We spent 2 hours in that parking lot, Jake gradually becoming more confident with starting, stopping, and shifting into second gear. By the end, he was smiling, the tension gone from his shoulders. This is actually kind of fun, he admitted as we switched back so I could drive us to lunch. Thanks for being so patient. Anytime, I said, and I meant it. That first lesson established a pattern. Every weekend, we'd meet for driving practice. I'd pick Jake up, we'd head to our parking lot, and I'd guide him through increasingly complex maneuvers. From basic starts and stops, we progressed to 3-point turns, hill starts, using a small incline at the edge of the lot, and eventually, actual road driving on quiet residential streets. What I hadn't anticipated was how these lessons would change things between us. There's something uniquely intimate about teaching someone to drive. You're literally putting your safety in their hands, trusting them with a potentially dangerous machine. At the same time, they're making themselves vulnerable, showing you their frustrations and insecurities. During our third lesson, Jake stalled at a stop sign on a quiet street, and a car behind us honked impatiently. I can't do this, he muttered, knuckles white on the steering wheel. Yes, you can, I said firmly. Ignore them. Take a breath, and just focus on what you're doing. He glanced at me, something shifting in his expression. You really believe in me, don't you? The question caught me off guard. Of course I do. Why wouldn't I? Jake shrugged, restarting the car. I don't know. I've just never been good at physical stuff. Sports, coordination, all that. Driving isn't about natural talent, I told him. It's about practice and patience. And you've got plenty of both. The smile he gave me then made my heart skip a beat. As the weeks passed, our driving lessons became the highlight of my week. We fell into easy conversation during the drives, talking about everything and nothing. Jake told me about his family, his overbearing mother who still called him twice a day, his father who had expected him to take over the family accounting business rather than pursue physics. I shared stories about my sister's new baby, my uncertainty about graduate school applications, my dream of someday driving cross-country. We should do that, Jake said one day as we cruised down a back road, him now confidently handling the gears. A road trip, I mean, once I get my license. The casual, we made something flutter in my chest. Yeah? Where would you want to go? Everywhere, he said, eyes on the road but a smile playing at his lips. The Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, those weird roadside attractions like the world's largest ball of twine. Very romantic, I joked, then immediately regretted my word choice. Jake glanced at me quickly before returning his attention to driving. It could be, he said softly. The air between us changed after that, charged with possibility, with words unsaid. Our hands would brush as I demonstrated gear shifts. Our eyes would meet a beat too long when celebrating a particularly smooth hill start. Once, when Jake successfully parallel parked between 2 cones I'd set up, he turned to me with such joy that for a moment I thought he might lean across the console and kiss me. He didn't, but I wanted him to. It was during our 6th lesson that everything shifted. We'd progressed to highway driving, merging onto the interstate for brief stretches before exiting. Jake was doing well, his confidence growing with each successful maneuver. As we headed back toward town, rain began to fall, light at first, then heavier. Should we head back? Jake asked, windshield wipers working steadily. You're doing fine, I assured him. Just take it slow and increase your following distance. He nodded, focused and serious. I watched his profile as he drove, the way his brow furrowed slightly in concentration, the careful precision of his movements. Something about seeing him like this, competent, determined, growing into a new skill, made my feelings impossible to ignore. The rain intensified suddenly, becoming a downpour that reduced visibility to almost nothing. Jake tensed but remained calm, slowing appropriately and maintaining control of the car. "There's a rest stop up ahead," I said, pointing to a sign. "Let's pull off and wait it out." Jake navigated carefully to the exit and into the nearly empty rest area parking lot, bringing the car to a perfect stop. He turned off the engine and let out a long breath. "That was intense," he said, turning to me with a mix of exhilaration and relief. "But I did it." "You did great," I told him, genuinely impressed. "Seriously, Jake. A month ago you couldn't get out of a parking space without stalling, and now you're handling highway driving in a downpour." The rain drummed on the roof, creating a cocoon of sound around us. The windows began to fog slightly, further isolating us from the outside world. "I couldn't have done it without you," Jake said, his voice quieter now. "You've been. I don't know how to thank you enough." "You don't need to thank me," I said. "I've enjoyed it." "Have you?" he asked, something vulnerable in his expression. I nodded, suddenly very aware of how close we were sitting, of the intimacy of being alone together in my car while rain isolated us from the rest of the world. "Alex," Jake said, my name sounding different somehow in the quiet car. "There's something I've been wanting to tell you." My heart began to race. "What is it?" He looked down at his hands, then back up at me. I didn't actually need this many lessons. I probably could have retaken the test after the third weekend. I blinked, processing this. "You, what?" "I kept finding reasons to need just one more lesson," he admitted, a flush creeping up his neck. "Because I wanted to spend time with you. Like this." The confession hung between us, changing everything and nothing all at once. "Why didn't you just ask me out?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the rain. Jake's laugh was self-deprecating. "Because I was scared. We've been friends for so long, and I didn't want to mess that up. But these past weeks, being with you like this, it's felt like maybe you might feel the same way." I looked at him, really looked at him. Jake, who had been in my life for years, always there, always important, but somehow never quite in focus the way he was now. "I do," I said simply. "Feel the same way." The smile that spread across his face was like sunshine breaking through clouds. Slowly, giving me every chance to pull away, he leaned across the console. I met him halfway, our lips meeting in a kiss that felt like the natural conclusion to a story we'd been writing for years without realizing it. When we pulled apart, Jake was looking at me with wonder. "I should have failed my driving test years ago," he murmured. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. Better late than never. The rain began to ease, but we stayed parked at the rest stop, talking for hours about everything. How long we'd each been harboring feelings, the moments when we'd almost said something, our mutual fear of ruining our friendship. It was cathartic and exhilarating, like finally solving a puzzle that had been bothering you for years. Eventually, we switched seats again, and I drove us back to town. Jake's hand found mine on the gear shift, his fingers intertwining with mine whenever I didn't need to change gears. "So," I said as we neared his apartment, "about that road trip." Jake's smile was radiant. "I'm thinking we start with something small. We can get away after I pass my test?" "It's a date," I agreed, the word feeling new and exciting. 2 weeks later, Jake retook his driving test. I waited anxiously in the DMV parking lot, pretending to read a book while actually watching the door like a hawk. When Jake emerged, his expression was unreadable for a moment before breaking into the biggest grin I'd ever seen. He held up his temporary license like an Olympic gold medal. I met him halfway across the parking lot, wrapping him in a hug that lifted him off his feet. "I knew you could do it." "We should celebrate," Jake said, his arms still around my waist. "How about I drive us to dinner tonight?" "In my car?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "With my clutch that you've been grinding for weeks?" Jake laughed, pressing a quick kiss to my lips. I promised to treat her with the utmost respect. Besides, I had an excellent teacher. That night, Jake drove us to dinner in my Honda, handling the gears with confidence and ease. As we sat across from each other at our favorite restaurant, Jake raised his glass in a toast. "To fail driving tests," he said, eyes twinkling. "And the best driving instructor a guy could ask for." I clinked my glass against his. "And to road trips," I added. "The first of many." Looking back now, I'm grateful for every stall, every grinding gear, every moment of frustration during those lessons. What started as a simple favor for a friend became the beginning of something neither of us had been brave enough to pursue on our own. Sometimes life gives you unexpected detours that lead exactly where you need to go. Jake and I have been together for almost a year now. We've taken that weekend road trip we planned, and several more since then. He's become quite the confident driver, though he still prefers when I take the wheel on long stretches. And every time we pass a driving school or see a car with a learner's permit sticker, we exchange a smile that holds our whole story. It turns out that learning to drive stick shift is a lot like falling in love. It takes patience, practice, and a willingness to stall out a few times before you find your rhythm. But once you do, there's nothing quite like the feeling of shifting gears smoothly, the open road ahead, and the perfect person beside you for the journey. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Jake had passed his test the first time. Would we have found our way to each other eventually? Or would we have continued in that limbo of almost something, never quite brave enough to take the risk? I like to think we would have figured it out somehow, but I'm grateful we didn't have to find out. There's a particular joy in teaching someone something you love and watching them grow from nervous beginner to confident practitioner. But there's an even greater joy in realizing that while you thought you were just teaching them to drive, you were both learning something far more important: how to trust, how to be vulnerable, how to take a chance on something that scares you. Next month, we're planning that cross-country road trip we talked about during our lessons. 2 weeks, no strict itinerary, just the open road and each other. Jake insists on driving at least half the time, and I'm happy to let him. After all, he earned his license fair and square, eventually. Sometimes the longest journeys begin with a stalled engine and the courage to try again. And sometimes the best navigators are the ones who know exactly when to let you find your own way and when to help you get back on course. I'm just grateful that Jake and I finally found our way to the same destination, even if the route was a bit more winding than we expected. So if you ever find yourself teaching someone to drive a manual transmission, remember, you might be teaching them more than just how to change gears. You might be changing the course of both your lives, one lesson at a time. And isn't that what the best journeys are all about? Total_char_count, 18,766.